As Professor Prescott mentioned, I was very lucky to be able to write the afterword to Clarence Miller's.
You can all see.
Oh yeah, I'm going to. I'll start sitting, and if you can't hear me well, just say so, and I'll be glad to stand. But I think my voice carries fairly well.
It does. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. But I was lucky to write that introduction. This paper grows out of really a paragraph, or it was actually an afterword. And the English quotations are from Dr. Miller's translation. At the end of More's Utopia, after character More expresses his desire to talk further with Hythloday about the best form of a commonwealth, then leads him into dinner, he in effect performs a final act of hospitality, gesturing toward an open-ended dialogue that he invites the reader to enter as well. And this is from the end of Utopia. Meanwhile, just as I can hardly agree with all the points he made, even though he is a person of unquestionable learning and wide experience of human affairs, so too do I readily confess that in the utopian commonwealth are many features which in our societies I would wish rather than expect to see. End quote. Character More has talked of where he agrees and disagrees with Hythloday, though not exhaustively, so here he leaves plenty for the reader to take up. And readers have done so through the centuries with a range of approaches to utopia as satire, social blueprint, jeu d'esprit, and more. But there is a larger discussion that Utopia participates in also, having to do with the philosophy adequate to negotiating our ways in the world. For character More must respond to Hythloday's commitment to a singular and ahistorical view of what it means to speak the truth, which he insists no king would want to hear. For his part, More proposes his historically conditioned philosophy based on the commonplace of the world as a stage, according to which a given speaker would employ a language responsive to the scene and situation at hand. So here's that rather long passage. I'll go ahead and read it, though I suspect it's very familiar to most people here. But there is another sort of philosophy better suited to public affairs. It knows its role and adapts to it, keeping to its part in the play at hand with harmony and decorum. This is the sort you should use. Otherwise, during a performance of a comedy by Plautus, when the slaves are joking around together, if you would come out onto the stage dressed like a philosopher and recite the passage from Octavia where Seneca argues with Nero, wouldn't it have been better for you to have a non-speaking part than to jumble together tragedy and comedy by reciting something inappropriate? By hauling in something quite diverse, you would spoil and distort the play then being presented, even if what you had were better in itself. Whatever play is being presented, play your part as best you can, and do not disturb the whole performance just because a more elegant play by someone else comes to mind. That's the end of that quote. The stage can accommodate any language or language style. So the point is not that any language, even Hythloday's preferred style, should be permanently excluded, but rather that the language one chooses should be decorous to the scene. As Elizabeth McCutcheon aptly puts it, decorum demands that something should be, quote, appropriate to the subject, speaker, audience, and occasion. Thus, a dignified and elegant speech is indecorous to a scene that calls for vulgar joking, not because there is any inherent fault in elegance, but rather because it violates the vulgarity underway. In a given context, this jocose play might even do some serious business, as in Hythloday's talk of golden chamber pots. As I shall explore, the implicit philosophy that character More here favors resonates across the centuries, even to some unexpected figures of recent memory. Note that More's invocation of the Theatrum Mundi commonplace does not oppose rhetoric to philosophy, but rather speaks of rhetoric as philosophy. As Ernesto Grassi sums the matter up, the rhetoric of Renaissance humanists is not merely the technique of exterior persuasion, that's his term, but also, and more fundamentally, the speech which is the basis of rational thought. In other words, rhetoric, with its responsiveness to the tropes and figures, all the resonances of metaphor that are inescapably part of even the most abstract of statements, itself constitutes the philosophy most nearly adequate to understanding our world. It provides a sense of reason interwoven with the complexities of the human life world. Such a philosophical language, alive to the contours of lived experience, is attuned to philosophy's what Grassi calls philosophy's specifically human work. One term for such a mode of thought is not relativism, but rather relationism. The term relationism, the earliest reference I find is Karl Mannheim's ideology in Utopia from 1936, but I get it more immediately from Father Ong. So relationism, which recognizes that because everything is connected to everything else, there is no single statement to make about anything. Further, because every statement conceals at least as much as it discloses, any statement, no matter how true, must be supplemented by further statements, which themselves will raise further questions, calling for further responses, on and on. A corollary is that because all statements reveal and conceal at the same time, we do well to engage with a variety of discourses, language worlds, and styles, each of which has its own specialization. There is no final word, but rather, in Father Ong's felicitous phrase, hermeneutic forever. As Ong puts it in his essay of that title, any human utterance makes sense because it is embedded, and here I'm quoting Ong, embedded in shared traditions, common knowledge, shared sensory experience, here and now personal interactions, and much more. Or as he put it in an unpublished book, Language as Hermeneutic, that he was working on near the end of his life, this is Father Ong still, the meeting of minds, the understanding in a given situation, involves not only words, but also the nonverbal existential context, which could be subject to further verbalization. None of this implies that there is no truth to be known, for if that were the case, we couldn't know it. But rather that there is no absolute and overarching human perspective or language adequate to all times, places, and circumstances. One is always involved in some play and does well to keep one's part in the play at hand, as character Moore says. Even if one chooses to take up a role as spectator, as Hythloday might be said to do, this is not to escape the theater of the world, for the audience is actor and character as well. Given our postmodern era's specialization in meta-awareness, we know that even to refuse a part in the play is to take up a distinctive role, as the character who refuses to participate. It's theater all the way down. Jared Wegmer rightly emphasizes that for Moore, the philosopher cannot be a scholastic, one who speaks in universals removed from particular persons and surroundings. Instead, I'm here quoting from Wegmer, the effective philosopher must know, adapt to, and protect his scanum. The Latin word that Wegmer focuses on refers to the scene or the stage of the theater. This is scanum. My Latin pronunciation is this weird amalgam of ancient and medieval and probably southern Indiana, where I'm from in the States. Actually, it refers even more specifically to the boards that compose the theater, the scena, the boards, thus directing attention to the very material conditions of the theatrical moment.